You're listening to Nevermind Radio, and this is SiriusXM's Town Hall with Nirvana. Here's your host, The Daily Show's Jon Stewart.
All right, kids, we're back. SiriusXM, Town Hall with Nirvana. I just want to say again, just thank you guys for your time and for sharing your recollections. It's really just been a really interesting evening, and I'm enjoying the hell out of hearing you guys. Want to go with Stephanie now from California. Hi. Stephanie? Oh, there you go.
I'd like to know who has surprised you most with his or her appreciation of your music.
I remember when Nevermind first came out, the dude from PM Dawn. Do you remember that? It was like the first MTV special where they were like, Nirvana's Nevermind is really storming the charts, and listen to what everybody has to say about it. And you know, maybe like a dude from The Replacements would say, yeah, it's a good record. Or someone from like another rock band would say, yeah, it's a good record. But then the dude from PM Dawn, I was like, rad.
Tom Hamilton, the bass player from Aerosmith, he told me he liked my bass lines.
Oh, remember? Well, you know one of the crazy things. Remember when Guns N' Roses did that November Rain video? If you watch the November Rain video, there's a scene where Axl is lying on like a couch at his therapist's office or something like that, and the camera pans by and there's a Nirvana hat. And we had these at the time. It was this like promotional item. It was a blue hat with yellow writing. It just said Nirvana, and he had put it next to him on it so that it was in the shot because he liked the record. And at the time, he was like the biggest rock star in the world, and that was weird I think to all of us.
I was at the MTV Video Music Awards, and I had this beer, like this nice like Sheaf Stout, and there was like Cindy Crawford getting her hair done, and just standing there, and she's like, "Hi," and she goes, "What do you got there?" I go, "A beer," and I hand it to her, and she took a hit off it.
Yeah! Can I just say something? You totally made out with Cindy Crawford.
No.
That is. Same glass. That same glass.
Oh, okay,
that
okay.
counts.
That's DNA. There's DNA.
There's DNA there, my brother.
Only
nice
2
lady.
degrees of separation, right?
Yeah. No, that's awesome. You know, there was a complicated relationship with guys like Axl Rose. You know, here's a guy, you know, you come out and suddenly you're rivals, and talk about sort of the difficulties of navigating that world now with some of these other sort of large bands.
Well, I'm a big buddies with Duff McKagan. He was a bass player in Guns N' Roses.
He's a sweet guy.
You know, back then it was kind of crazy, and
You know, my kids went to kindergarten, pre-K with Slash's kids.
That'll settle a feud.
Yeah. But honestly, you know what I was just reminded of recently was that after Kurt died, one of the first phone calls I got was from Matt Sorum, who was the drummer of Guns N' Roses.
Right.
He called and left a message on my machine and just said, "Hey man, I'm really sorry and I hope you're doing well." And I thought that was really cool. You know, they're good dudes. You know, I mean, anyone who's ever met any of those guys, Slash or Duff, they're really nice guys.
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
really good guys.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I meant more like in the moment of that. You know, these are guys that are out there, and they. You know, there's a certain
back then?
brashness.
Well,
yeah,
Duff and I
back then
almost
there was
got
that.
into a
It's not
brawl.
now.
It's kind of a different story back then.
That's what I meant more.
There was something between you guys and Axl. Was it the MTV? I was backstage, and there was
It
this
was
thing,
Kurt and
don't go
Axl.
near the trailer. There's
Right.
all the security back there. Like there was going to be some big fight. I mean, there wasn't going to be a fight, but I remember it was tense.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I really do. I mean, I think
I remember warm Budweisers, and that was a big
I think
letdown.
what had
Like,
happened
warm
was
Budweisers.
that they wanted us to. They were about to do a big stadium tour, and they wanted us to come out on the road with them.
Right.
And we just weren't ready to do something like that, and it wasn't our scene, you know. So I think we were in saying no, it kind of blew up into something else. And I mean, you have to also understand that we were coming from two totally different places, so our whole world rejected that scene as something that was just not real, and or whatever it was. There were big differences, fundamental differences in what we did.
Right.
But that was a long time ago. I'm trying to be diplomatic. I don't know.
No, listen, I remember I had the same problems with a couple of VJs. You know, we could talk about that. I got, you know, my problems with Alan Hunter are legendary.
Legendary.
All right, here we go. Brian from New York. Where you at?
Dave, after the breakup of Scream in 1990, you were introduced to Chris and Kurt by King Buzzo of the Melvins. When you auditioned for them, Chris is known to have said that they both knew you were the right guy for the job in 2 minutes. But what about you? Did you have any trepidation at all in joining the band, or did you feel like you'd come home in a sense?
Honestly, when I heard that they needed a drummer, I immediately went and bought Bleach, which I'd heard before and I liked, but I didn't have the whole record. I just like taped a couple songs off of it, you know. So I went and I just learned the record from front to back. I mean, honestly, I knew I was capable of doing it. I think it was just more a matter of chemistry, you know, just to see if we really played well together. And the first time we set up and jammed, we just blazed through songs, you know. And I sang backup vocals too, which I don't think anyone had done yet. And Kurt was into that. And you know, when it's a three-piece, I'd been in a three-piece before, a couple bands before that when I was a teenager, and there's something about being in a three-piece. It's different than being in a four-piece or a five-piece. It's a really powerful thing because it's a band stripped down to pretty much its basic elements, and Chris and I were a badass rhythm section, you know, and Kurt was an amazing songwriter, had a great voice. So when we set up in a room, like a 10 by 10 room, it just sounded like Nirvana. It was it. It was super simple. We blazed through those songs, and I don't know if I really felt like, God, I hope I got the job. I just felt like, well, that sounded pretty good, you know?
You remember him showing up, Chris?
Yeah, I remember he showed up at the airport with a drum set. He brought a whole drum set on the plane, so we went to baggage claim, oversized luggage, and there's a drum set, and we loaded it up. And like the next day, we went to rehearsal and we started to play every day after that. And
well, it was funny too because I remember one of the first things I really remember is I had this apple that I brought. I think I got it on the plane or something like that. And these two picked me up at the airport, and we get into the van, and I have this apple, and I say to Kurt, I was like, "Hey, you want a bite of my apple?" And he goes, "No, man, those things make my teeth bleed." I'll never forget that. I don't know.
Is it harder to join a band or is it harder to leave a band? You know, you guys were together. And Dave walks in and he's joining you guys, but he's also leaving another band. What was harder for you and Chris?
Well, I remember calling you on the phone, and I think it was Pete. Like answered the phone, and I'm like, "Is Dave there?" And he's like, "Yeah," like he knew. Yeah.
Well, it was tough because coming from Scream, those were guys that I'd been in a band with for years and years, and we had struggled and played in clubs and starved and, you know, done the whole punk rock thing but we were stuck and the band was just sort of shut down.
I remember calling you. It was because Skeeter, the bass player, quit.
Yeah.
In L.A., so you're stuck in North Hollywood, and you told me that the landlord took the front door off the house because the rent was
he wanted to evict us, so he just took the front door off the house. He took the front door off the
house. So like Dave had to get out of there.
Yeah. So I mean, to me, and honestly, it was my mother that gave me this advice, where I said, "God, Mom, I don't know what to do. I mean, I don't want to leave Pete and Franz. They're like family, but I'm getting asked to join this band up in Seattle, and I've got nothing. What do I do?" And she's like, "Sometimes you just got to do what's best for yourself, you know?"
So you decided to go to school. To community college.
Yeah. No. Trade school, and I started doing underwater welding.
There's a lot of money in underwater welding.
You could have fixed the door if you'd known a little bit.
I could have fixed the door.
Could have put that door right back on there.
I know.
For you guys, how long had you and Kurt been together at that point?
About 1986.
Okay.
So it was, what, 90, 91?
4 years?
Yeah, 4 years, yeah.
Is
I
it
knew
hard
Kurt
to bring
before
another
that.
energy into that?
No, because we went through all these drummers. And we had, we had this...
They're like shoes. You just put them on.
It's like, this drummer was good, he was all right, but always something going on.
Yeah, but you had the craziest drummers, Chris. Like, Aaron, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he...
Aaron was...
Was he the one that drove... Didn't he drive a truck through a supermarket window or something like that?
Aaron's dad was a merchant marine, and they had this console TV, and he smuggled this thing into the country, this taxidermy, and it was a mongoose fighting a cobra. The cobra was wrapped around the mongoose, and it was like this, and it was like totally rad.
And then there was Dave.
Yeah, Dave, who had anger issues, and that could
Well,
Wait.
the first time
there was
I
another
met
Dave.
the first time I met Dave,
Dave would kick ass,
was
and it was
at
just like
a
whoa,
laundromat where Kurt and I were at the grocery store or something next door, and Dave's like, "Hey, let's go to the laundromat," and he hands me a bunch of quarters, and he goes, "Okay, I'm gonna get in this dryer, close the door, put the." That was Dave.
I think those issues are other than anger.
Chad was pretty easy
Chad
going.
was mellow, right?
Yeah, he's a mellow dude.
And then Dale Crover, who was sort of one of the first.
He was also in the Melvins, so he was kind of a drummer on loan. And Danny Peters was in Mudhoney.
That's right.
And he was a drummer.
I was kind of like the disco drummer, you know. I was the one that just went. That was my job.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to. Oh, here we go. Here's one from Washington. Jonathan.
Yeah, my name's Jonathan Miller from Seattle, Washington. You might have stopped there.
Where's that?
Anyway, the question, in the early days before the tour buses and the plush hotels, many people watched you grow while being part of the music scene. There's a lot of underground bands you're familiar with rely on a network of basically friends of friends that help support each other to make things happen just so that they can do what they love, namely making music or being part of that scene. Just wonder if you had any stories about one of those that helped you, carry on through a tough time or, simply gave you a couch or a floor to crash on.
Well, we had the Posies rehearsal space we needed to play. And one time when Danny Peters played drums, it was on the Sliver single, the song Sliver. And we were the band Tad were recording their record, and they were on a dinner break. And that's when we went in with Danny, and we recorded the song in like an hour. And so they basically gave us the studio time.
On their lunch break.
Actually, one of the greatest ones was in Chicago when you came to see us at the Metro in '91. Kurt, equipment would get smashed up, guitars would get smashed up, and he would chop at my drum set, these two would throw their guitars at me at the end of the show, and they would chop at my drum set. So by the time we got to Chicago on that Nevermind tour, my drum set just looked like Swiss cheese. It had holes in it, and it was so busted up that I kept asking our tour manager if maybe I could get a new drum set. And Monty Lee Wilkes, and he kept saying, just could you hold out one more week? I said, yeah, I can hold out one more week. So finally, when we got to the Metro, I thought, okay, tonight I'm just going to splinter my drum set so that I have to get a new one. So I told Kurt before the show, I said, dude, tonight at the end of the gig, let's make sure that we break it so that there's nothing left, so that I can get a new set. Kurt's like, okay. So at the end of the gig, we spent a good 20 minutes. Drums are hard to break too.
Yeah, man. They're made well.
They're made well, and they bounce, and you're trying to crush them.
We were in the van, and we went by a music store and said, all drums, 40% off. And Dave's like,
tonight's the night.
Yeah,
but
we're going to go there and buy a new drum set.
For whatever reason, the next day, I couldn't get a fucking drum set, so we were on tour with Urge Overkill, and I had to use Blackie, the drummer of Urge Overkill.
Blackie Onassis.
Yeah, I had to use his drums for a while. But then, the best part was 2 nights later, I'm using his drum set, and we're playing this place in St. Louis called Mississippi Nights. and the bouncers were being fucking assholes, and they were not cool to the kids. And so most of these places we were playing were just packed to the gills. Like, kids were stage diving, and it looked like riots, you know. And so if you had never been to a show like that,
had a riot at
they just had a riot there like a couple weeks before. And so if you'd never seen that before, then you just think that it was out of control and it wasn't cool. So these security guys weren't being fucking cool, and Kurt kept saying, like, he kept trying to get them to cool out, and they wouldn't cool out. So finally Kurt said, "Everybody up on stage." And it turned into this crazy mini riot where all these kids jumped up on stage, and I got freaked out. So I ran back into Urge Overkill's dressing room, and I was like, "You guys, there's a fucking riot out there." And Blackie was like, "That's cool. Where's my fucking drum set?"
I made that speech about anarchy.
I remember.
Yeah.
You cooled it out.
Yeah. It was a lecture on anarchy. And about anarchy is important, but it requires responsibility. Yeah. The only way anarchy is going to work is if we all accept responsibility. Yeah. So
you were a prophet.
I was a prophet.
Wavy
Al Bakunin of punk rock.
Gravy.
Where were you when I was bartending at City Gardens? Shit. Could have used you to stop a couple of fights. Braden, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I grew up in a religious household, and I wasn't really allowed to listen to rock music. In fact, the first time I ever heard Nirvana was when they played a snippet of the Smells Like Teen Spirit video on the news the day they found Kurt's body. As soon as I heard it, I knew I needed to hear more of it. So I got a friend to tape Nevermind for me. And I would wait until my parents were in bed and put my headphones on and listen to it under the covers over and over again. And I had never heard music like that in my life. I knew then that I had to learn how to play the guitar so I could try to make music like that. Nevermind was my introduction to rock and roll. Do any of you have a moment like mine, a moment where a particular album excited you and awakened you to a world of music you didn't know, or made you want to become a musician?
Yeah. Absolutely. You have that epiphany about what cool music is. And I just met this dude, Buzz Osborne, King Buzzo, and he was in the Melvins, and he lent me this record called Generic Flipper, and I put it on, and I listened to it, and I go, this sounds really weird and just kind of like distorted, and I put it on again, and I'm like, well, it's kind of cool. And the third time, you know, I was laying on a waterbed the third time. And I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like, this is art, or this is like as good as anything that, you know, Led Zeppelin or Black Sabbath did, or anybody. So I had that epiphany. And then people tell me, like, I hear that story so much about Nevermind. Like, people come up to me on the street and says, hey, Chris, I want to tell you how important Nevermind was. And I had this eye-opening. So when I hear that, I always chalk one up for Kurt on that one. Like, that's for him. So I really appreciate that.
Mine was the Edgar Winter Group.
Frankenstein?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm with you, brother.
That was my epiphany.
With a UFO lands or whatever?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right to the drum solo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a little side note to that. An engineer I know in L.A. just had to go in and they had to re-record that song with Edgar Winter for something because they couldn't get the licensing. And Edgar Winter couldn't remember any of the song. But luckily the engineer, like you, knew every single part, the drums and the keyboards and whatever, and they reconstructed the track so it sounds exactly like it did.
Dude, that's like the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah. Including the drum solo. I guess the drummer knew the drum solo, whatever.
For sure.
What about you, Butch? What in terms of?
God, I remember I was like really, really young. My mom was a music teacher, so I grew up hearing music all the time. I started playing piano when I was like 4 or 5 years old, so my background was playing piano. And I was probably like 8 years old or 9 years old. They were watching a TV show called The Smothers Brothers, I think, and The Who were on. And they played My Generation. I think, right? It was my generation, and they smashed up the drum kit.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's giving
The
away
smoke
my
pots
age. I'm
blew up.
older than these guys here, but I remember
That's
seeing
where
it,
Townsend's
and I went and
ears
told
went.
my mom and dad, I want to play drums, and after and they watched the performance, they go, "What do you want to play drums for?" And my mom said, "If you keep playing piano, I'll buy you a Sears drum kit at Christmas, like $50 drum kit or something." And of course, as soon as I started playing drums, I stopped playing piano. But that I remember seeing that and just seeing how Keith Moon played, and was like, that's rock and roll, man. I gotta play rock and roll.
It's funny because I watched that same show with the Smothers Brothers and the Who, and I thought, I got to write jokes. All right, we're going to take a break. SiriusXM Town Hall with Nirvana. We're going to take a break and play Lithium.